When a security alert fires, life can go from quiet to chaotic in a heartbeat. A rule triggers in your security information and event management platform. An endpoint pop-up from Endpoint Detection and Response, EDR, appears, or your cloud console flags a suspicious login. In that moment, the real question is not what the alert says, but what you should do next and how fast. This narration is part of the Tuesday Insights feature from Bare Metal Cyber Magazine, developed by Bare Metal Cyber, and it focuses on that decision point, the practical art of alert triage. Alert triage is the quiet layer between noisy tools and the rest of your organization. It is the way you turn a flood of raw signals into a small set of clear actions. Instead of thinking about triage as a fancy feature or a vendor pitch, think of it as a simple promise. Every alert gets a consistent decision. That decision might be to close it, to keep an eye on it, to investigate further, or to escalate it into a full incident. When that promise holds, your operations feel calmer and more predictable, even when the alert volume is high.
Most of the time, alert triage lives in or near a Security Operations Center, SOC. Analysts sit between systems like the SIEM, the EDR, and various cloud or identity consoles, and they act as the front door to incident response. It is important to be clear about what triage is not. It is not deep forensic work, which usually comes later for serious incidents. It is not the entire incident response lifecycle. It is also not just the paging system that wakes someone up at 3 in the morning. Triage is the decision layer that answers 3 questions. Is this real? Does it matter here? And who needs to care?
The story really starts in the first few minutes after an alert lands. An analyst sees a new item appear in a queue, an inbox, or a chat channel. They get a short rule name, a severity rating, and a handful of fields describing the user, the asset, and the type of activity. Their first pass is quick, often less than a minute. They scan for context, checking whether the asset is critical, whether the user is privileged, and whether similar alerts have fired recently. Even at this stage, the goal is not to know everything. The goal is to sort the alert into a likely bucket. Behind that quick glance, there is usually a repeatable checklist, even if it lives in the analyst's head. They may pivot into the SIEM to pull more events, into the EDR to see process details, or into a cloud console to confirm where a login came from. They look for patterns, such as repeat alerts on the same host, overlaps with ongoing incidents, or signs that this might be part of a broader campaign. If the behavior is clearly benign, they close it with a note. If it is clearly malicious, they escalate and start the investigative process. The hardest work sits in the middle, where the alert is ambiguous and the data is incomplete.
This is where structured playbooks make a real difference. A playbook might say that if the alert touches a privileged account, it should be treated as higher priority, or that if multiple devices show the same suspicious pattern, it should be escalated as a possible spread. The combination of written guidance and analyst judgment is what keeps triage outcomes consistent across different shifts, different people, and different days. Without that structure, triage becomes improvisation, and similar alerts can get very different answers.
Over time, you see recurring patterns in how triage is carried out. One pattern is volume triage, where analysts work through large batches of similar alerts, such as repeated failed logins or recurring detections on a known safe administration tool. Here, the aim is to spot the one item that breaks the pattern, perhaps a burst of failures from a new country or an alert on a server that should never show that behavior. Another pattern is priority triage, where anything tied to high-value assets, sensitive data, or critical business processes jumps to the front of the line, regardless of what else is in the queue.
A practical quick win for many teams is to focus on one noisy but important alert type and tighten the triage around it. For example, you might standardize how you handle authentication failures or user-reported phishing emails, You decide what context must be checked, how much history to review, and exactly when to escalate. For a small or stretched team, this single improvement can change the daily experience from ad hoc decisions to a predictable pattern that everyone understands and trusts. It also makes training new analysts much easier.
As your triage process matures, it stops being just alert handling and starts acting like a feedback engine. The outcomes of triage can feed threat hunting backlogs, requests for detection tuning, and risk discussions with business owners. If you notice that alerts from a particular application are almost always closed as false positives, that is a strong signal that the detection rules or logging for that application need attention. If you see repeated escalations linked to one business unit or one type of external partner, that pattern can shape future projects and controls. Good triage delivers real, measurable value. When it works, incident responders spend most of their time on real problems instead of on sorting through noise. Analysts face fewer duplicate tickets and fewer fire drills that end in false alarms. Shift handovers become smoother because the status of important alerts is clear. At a human level, this means less burnout and less frustration. At an organizational level, it means that your limited skilled staff spend their energy where it matters most, rather than wrestling with an endless stream of low-value alerts. There is also a strong reporting benefit. When triage decisions are consistently recorded, you can measure false positive rates, detection gaps, and response times in meaningful ways. You can answer questions such as which alert types most often catch real issues, which rules generate wasted effort, and how long it usually takes to get from alert to decision. Without this discipline at the triage layer, your dashboards and reports are built on scattered notes and assumptions, which makes strategic decisions much harder. None of this comes for free. Designing playbooks, training analysts, and tuning detections takes time and attention. Automated enrichment and scoring can help reduce workload, but they also add complexity and need maintenance. There is a cultural side as well. Pushing for consistency can feel restrictive to experienced staff who are used to relying on their instincts. The healthiest approach is to treat playbooks as guardrails rather than scripts. They set a strong default path while leaving space for expert judgment when alerts do not fit the usual mold. It is also important to be honest about the limits of triage. It cannot repair missing or low-quality logs, it cannot build you an accurate asset inventory, and it cannot force good identity hygiene. It can only make decisions based on the signals and context it receives. Triage also does not replace deeper investigation, threat hunting, or architecture reviews. A helpful mental model is to think of triage as a smart router and an early warning system. It directs attention and sets priority, but it does not do all the work by itself. When triage breaks down, you often see the impact in people and behavior before you see it in a breach timeline. One warning sign is simple overload. Queues grow faster than they shrink, and analysts spend their time chasing the oldest items instead of the most important ones. Another is rubber stamp triage, where alerts are closed quickly with little review because analysts no longer trust that anything useful will show up. In both cases, real threats can hide in plain sight, buried in the noise. Shallow adoption is another failure mode. An organization might create categories, write playbooks, and talk about triage in meetings, but the day-to-day practice does not change. Tickets are created without meaningful notes, categories are used inconsistently, and escalations depend more on who is on shift than on the content of the alert. On paper, the team appears to have a mature process. In reality, it is still ad hoc work with a new vocabulary. This gap between appearance and reality can be one of the most dangerous places to sit. Healthy triage shows up through different signals. Queues may still be busy, but urgent alerts are handled quickly and rarely slip through the cracks. Analysts can explain in simple language why a particular alert was closed, monitored, or escalated, and their reasoning lines up with the written playbooks. Patterns found in triage, such as repeat false positives or repeat high-priority escalations, feed into tuning work, process changes, and risk discussions. Over time, you see fewer noisy alerts, clearer priorities, and a shared sense that triage outcomes are shaping the rest of the security program. Sometimes the easiest way to judge triage health is to listen to how people talk about it. If the team describes triage as a way to make sense of all the incoming signals, that is a good sign. If they describe it as the place where alerts go to die, or as the thing that keeps them from doing real work, then the process likely needs attention. Pairing those human signals with simple metrics, such as mean time to triage and the ratio of true to false positives, can give you a grounded view of how well your front door to incident response is really working.
At its heart, alert triage is about turning a constant stream of noisy security signals into a manageable set of clear decisions. It is not a product you buy, but a way of working that blends tools, process, and human judgment in the first few minutes after an alert fires. When it works, it protects your people from burnout, keeps your focus on the riskiest activity, and generates the data you need to keep getting better. When it does not, everything downstream becomes more chaotic and less effective.
As you think about your own environment, it can help to ask a few simple questions. How do alerts arrive? Who looks at them first? What decisions do they make? And how are those decisions recorded? If the answers are vague, that is not a reason for blame. It is an opening for improvement. Even small steps, such as clearer categories, better notes on outcomes, or a focused playbook for one noisy alert type, can shift triage from constant firefighting toward a calmer, more reliable decision system.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.